Hi everyone, my name's Thomas and I am a third year astrophysics student studying at the University of St Andrews in Scotland. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about how I prepare for my university physics and astrophysics exams. This video is going to be split into three sections, going over how I plan my studying, how I go about my studying, and how I make that studying as effective as it can be. There'll be timestamps appearing here in the video just now, but if you want to jump ahead, those same timestamps are in the video description below, so you can jump to the bit that is most interesting to you. Of course, I'd recommend you stick about for the whole video. The first thing I want to talk about is planning to study. I find that you can't study effectively unless you know what you're going to do, and this means having a plan before you start studying. Before the teaching weeks have even finished, I've started my studying plan. Normally I start this maybe 2 weeks before the revision period. Sometimes it's only 1 week. This year it happened to be one just because of other things that came up. The reason I do this is because by the time you're in the final couple of weeks of teaching, you know which modules are going to be winding up sooner. By the time you get to maybe the second last week of teaching, you should know which ones will be the ones finishing early. And those are the ones that you can start bringing study in a little bit sooner than the ones that aren't finished. It also means that you know how many days you have available to study. This means that you can spread out your time equally between all your modules, or a little unequally if some modules are more challenging. But it also means that you know where your deadlines are for transitioning between periods of study. And I'll come on to that a little bit later. The other really important thing to do when you start planning your study timetable is ring fence time for yourself. There are certain things that as a human being you need to do. You need to sleep, you need to eat, you need to take breaks. Some of those breaks will be in the form of things you already enjoy. Some societies might run a couple of things into the revision period just to give you something to do to get away from studying. For example, the Celtic Society, which I run, we ran our final Scottish Gaelic class on the Tuesday of the first revision week to give people a little bit of a break from study. We also ran a games night because it's something that doesn't involve a lot of academic thought. It's something that's there to be a bit of fun, a bit of a chat, and it's genuinely really important. You also want to build these in yourself. Don't rely on societies or other groups you might be part of to do it for you. This means marking off time that you're going to play some video games or watch a movie or go for a walk with a friend, something like that that isn't studying. This is really important or you will burn out before you get to your exams. Taking an hour off here and there or taking a full day off from studying is really important. Trust me, this is my 6th semester of doing this. I know what I'm on about. The other thing that I found really good with ring fencing time is knowing when the exams are well in advance and having a studying plan lets you ring fence the day before that exam for study only for that exam. Now, last minute cramming is not a substitute for proper study. However, it is the perfect time to do past paper questions. From this you can get a sort of understanding of how the module exam is going to run. Now, this year they might be a little bit different because COVID-19 pandemic, open book exams, they could have been written a little differently. But a lot of the time it's the same member of staff that's setting the questions, and they'll set questions in a very similar style. Now, this isn't what I would say should form the backbone of your revision, which is why I say it's one of the last things you should do. But being able to sit down and go through an exam paper in exam-like conditions is really helpful the day before the exam because you know what to expect. The other thing that I would recommend doing at this point, before you've started studying, is work out how much you're willing to study, and more importantly, how much you're able to study. This means looking at how much time you have available to you, and thinking, do I need to work 10 hours a day? Can I work 8 hours a day? Set a realistic goal for how much you want to study every day. Typically, I go for something that's more like a 9 to 5. Sometimes I'll start a little earlier, at sort of 7:30. Sometimes I'll start a little later, maybe closer to 10 or 11 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon if I've slept in. Work out how much you're planning to study and work consistently, because trying to cram it all in is just another recipe for burnout. The other reason that I choose to do a 9 to 5, or trying to do a 9 to 5, is so that I leave my evenings open for stuff like this, for making YouTube videos, for playing video games, for talking to friends, for watching movies, watching Netflix, watching YouTube. It leaves all this time free for me to do things that I get enjoyment from that aren't studying. It gives me time to decompress, for my brain not to be focused on equations and postulates and theories. It gives me time to recover from a lot of really hard academic work. Now that you've ring-fenced your time, I'm probably going to throw all of your study schedules a little bit out the window when I say block your time in half-hour chunks. Not hours, not 2 hours, not I'm going to do this morning, this afternoon. Half-hour chunks. The reason that I say this is that there are a lot of tasks that don't take a full hour, but maybe they take 45 minutes, or maybe they take an hour and a half. Now, if something takes an hour and a half and you're blocking in 1 hour chunks, you'll have blocked out 2 hours for that thing. That means one of two things, unless you're extremely disciplined. What that means is either you will dilly-dally, you'll take extra time to do that thing that could only take 90 minutes, meaning it'll take the full 2 hours. The other thing that can happen if you set aside 2 hours for an hour and a half's work is that you do an hour and a half's work and think, oh, I've got an extra half an hour, and you take a half-hour break, and then so many of us are so good at hitting that next episode button on Netflix, and then suddenly an hour and a half's gone and you've lost a lot of study time. The other thing to do at this point is work out what modules are a priority. Some modules you'll be extremely confident in. For example, last semester, for me, that was a module called Extragalactic Astronomy and Cosmology. I didn't find that module too challenging in terms of understanding it. I didn't need to spend hours and hours and hours and hours focusing on every minute detail to get those marks in the exam. However, this semester I have a module called Electromagnetism, and I don't understand a lot of it. So I'm going to have to spend a lot more time on that module. You'll know which of your modules are a bigger priority. However, I'm not saying you want to spend 50% of your time on one module and then split the rest of them up over the remaining 50%. Keep track of what you're planning to do so that you're not over-scheduling one module, but keep track of how much work you do every day. Are you spending too much time on one module if things are taking longer than you think they're going to? Are you skipping a module every day because you're kind of putting it off because you don't like it? Keep track of what you're doing every day so you know that you're studying enough, that you're meeting your target of, say, 6 hours of work a day or 8 hours of work a day. Keep track of the modules you're doing and make sure that you're not over-biasing towards anything. And now, after doing all of that thought, now start populating your study timetable. Fill out the amount of time you want to spend doing each module. Fill out when you're going to have lunch. Now, you can move things about. If you decide, you know what, I'd like to work for another hour and then have lunch at 2 o'clock rather than having lunch at 1 o'clock. That's okay. It's why I recommend using something like Excel or like Notion or something like that to make your study timetable, because it's digital and it's fluid. The idea behind a study timetable is not to lock you into this rigid, strict schedule that you cannot deviate from. The idea behind it is to give you some structure so that you have a plan for what you're going to do that day, so that you don't wake up thinking, oh, what am I going to study? And then spend the next hour trying to figure out what is the most important thing to you that day. You know what it's going to be because you decided it a week in advance. And if you find that you've not planned it as well as you can change things. If you're finding one module is going to be a lot more work than you thought it was, you can add in extra time for that. If you find one that's going to be way easier than you thought it was, great! You can take time out of that to give to a harder module, or to give yourself some more breaks. The important thing with a study timetable is that it's there to support you. It's not there to bully you into studying. Now, on to section 2, now that I've given a really long overview of how I set up a study timetable. How do I actually study? Like, how do I plan the phases of study, as I call them? The reason that I say phases of study is because my studying takes a few different forms. At the start of the revision period, I will spend time going over my lecture notes and rewriting them. Now, you might be thinking, what's the point of that? Well, during the semester, I take my notes on this. It's my Samsung Galaxy Tab S6 Lite, and it's great for taking rough notes in lectures, even when they're recorded online. However, they're a mess. They're not written extremely neatly, they get the information there so that I can refer to it quickly and figure out roughly what's going on, but they're not as detailed as I want for my revision. So I go through and I rewrite my notes neatly and with well-drawn diagrams because this aids my retention of the knowledge. It also makes me really familiar with the content again. Some of the stuff I've not looked at in depth really since early in the course, or perhaps since the class test. It's been quite a while by the time we get to the revision period. So although I take my lecture notes on my tablet, I don't rewrite my notes on it. What I rewrite my notes on is just simple pen and paper. Specifically, I use the Oxford Campus notebooks. They have these little icons in the corner that let me scan it into my phone, and they're really quite nice quality paper, which makes it really good for using a fountain pen. If you're interested in the app, then I talk a little bit more about it in this video, which is where I talked about all the apps I use in my physics degree. Now you might be wondering, why rewrite everything on paper? I've already taken notes electronically, why not type them up or rewrite them again neatly on a tablet? The reason for this is that research has shown that writing on paper actually has more impact than writing on a tablet, which has more impact than typing. This is an impact on retention. Writing with your hand, physically writing it, means that more of the information is retained by your brain. After I've rewritten all of my notes, so I've written up my modules in these Oxford Campus notebooks, and I've got essentially my own version of the textbook, my own version of the lecture notes. After doing all of that, I condense my notes. I'll go through every lecture and I'll pull out the key concepts, the key equations, the key things I need to know. Equations will get put on an equation sheet for that module. Now, in the days of closed book exams, so before the pandemic, I'd memorise the really important ones off that sheet, and anything else that happened to go in there, great. In the days of open book exams, so I have access to my notes, as in right now during the pandemic, I don't go about memorising the equations. Some will stick in your head, like, I've used it so many times I now know the universal law of gravitation, the Newtonian one. But I don't go about memorising every equation in the book. The reason for this is I can have my equation sheets sitting right next to me in the exam so I can just quickly refer to them. The important thing is being able to use the equations, not remember where every single physical constant goes in them, because you never remember if permittivity or permeability is on the top or the bottom of a fraction. Just know it's in there somewhere. No idea if it's top or bottom. The reason I condense my notes is because although lectures are great at conveying a lot of information, giving you the context around everything, not all of it is really applicable for getting the marks in the exam. I don't need to know the history of the Carnot cycle. I need to know what it is, how it works, and how I answer a question about it. And that's what I pull out of a lecture. The third phase of my studying is going through questions. It's practicing the subject. There is this widely held misconception amongst so many people that the way you get good at physics and maths is by reading textbooks, reading lecture notes, watching lecture recordings, and just absorbing it all like by osmosis or something. This is just wrong. The way you get good at physics and maths is not by reading textbooks. It's by using physics and maths. I play the piano. I did not get good at playing the piano by going over every page of a book of sheet music and reading it, note for note, reading every dynamics, marking, reading every accent, every staccato dot. I didn't get good at piano by reading piano music. I got good at piano by playing piano. I got good at tenor horn by playing tenor horn. I got mediocre at trumpet by playing trumpet. You don't get good at physics and maths by reading physics and maths. You get good at physics and maths by doing physics and maths. This is what forms the backbone of your study. You might not feel like you're getting a lot of understanding out of writing your lecture notes. I kind of feel like that at points as well. However, I've done this so many times that it has shown to have worked. I make the connections between things by going back over my notes, and then when I come to doing the tutorial questions, I understand them a lot better. I do better than I did the first time round. I go through almost every tutorial question available, assuming there's enough time for that, and I test myself. If I make a mistake, I work out why I made that mistake. I try and find a similar question and do that to learn from my mistakes. You don't learn by just reading the solutions, you learn by working out why you made the mistake. The fourth and final stage of my study is what I said you should ring fence a day for, going over past papers. Self-mark them, a lot of them won't come with solutions. If you can self-mark a paper, it means you know where those marks are coming from. It means you know what you need to try and do. And if you're getting a pretty good mark out of a self-assessed paper, assuming you're being tough on yourself, which I recommend being, you're gonna do okay in the exam. As long as you put in the work, you should be fine. The other important thing I would say to do during studying, and this is external to going over notes or answering tutorial questions or doing exam past papers, speak to your tutors. You have had tutors for the entirety of the semester, and if they aren't offering to do extra tutorial sessions in revision, ask them. If you have questions, ask your tutors, ask your lecturers for help. They're still there to teach you. They will, in most cases, be more than happy to help. They don't want to see you fail. This is something that I think a lot of people don't realise, is that the people who teach at universities are teaching because they want to impart knowledge. They're not teaching to give you a hard time. They're not teaching because they've got nothing better to do. Teaching at a university is hard, and they do it because they enjoy teaching. Ask them for help. In most cases, they will be more than happy to. So, on to the third and final section of this probably very long video by now. Thank you for sticking with it this long, unless you've just jumped to this part, in which case, welcome. This is the section where I'm going to talk about how I structure a session of study. I've talked about my overarching structure of study, but that doesn't really explain what I do every day. What I do every day is something called the Pomodoro technique. This is a technique of study that involves taking your work and doing it in 25-minute blocks with a 5-minute break in between. And every 4 or 5 times you do this, you then take a longer break, a 10-minute break or a 15-minute break. This is a form of study that I've used for the past few years, and I find it incredibly useful. It's the method of study that has allowed me to do 12-hour days in the past. In fact, in my first year at university, I did the vast majority of my studying for my Astronomy and Astrophysics 1 exam in 1 day, because the exam timetable was a little horrific and it didn't really allow enough time for me to spend much time beyond that 1 day studying for this exam. I used this technique for a 12-hour study day, and I topped the year in this module. It allowed me to cram everything into 1 day and study really effectively and focus really well on the content. In fact, if you'd like to try the Pomodoro technique yourself, and you'd like to do it with a bit of community around it, a little bit of accountability, so it's not just you sitting in your room staring at your work for 25 minutes and then having a 5-minute break, then come and check out my Twitch streams over on twitch.tv/InversionSci. The link will be in the video description below. I've been doing a lot of these streams at the minute in the run-up to exams. I also play a lot of games over there if you want a bit of a break from studying, so go jump over there, give me a follow, and you'll get notified of streams. In fact, if you want other notifications from me, then make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon. The reason the Pomodoro technique works is it prevents you from burning out. It gives you that 25 minutes of real focus because you know that 5-minute break is coming. I've also found it really good for stopping me browsing social media. I don't go on Twitter for 5 minutes that turns into an hour. I don't go on YouTube for 5 minutes that turns into an hour and a half. It stops me procrastinating, and it's always worked really well. It's why I use it. So that's how I prepare for studying, that's the phases of study that I go through, that's the methods I use in a day when I'm studying. And I just have one final bit of advice for you when it comes to revision. When you have an exam at 9:30 in the morning, go to bed at a reasonable time. No amount of cramming the night before an exam is going to do you as much good as a good night's sleep. Honestly, I can't stress this one enough. If you're sleep deprived during an exam, you're not gonna do as well. So get a good night's sleep. If you think that anything in this video has been helpful, if anything that I've talked about has resonated with you and you think you might try that in your own study, then please drop a like down below and maybe comment about what you think you'll take away from this video if you have any suggestions. In fact, drop all your study hints yourself in the comment section below and we'll see if we can get a nice repository of advice for people. That'd be really great. In the meantime though, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future videos. Check out my Twitch streams for the Pomodoro streams and for my gaming streams, and I will see you in my next video. See ya!